All right, gentlemen, let's talk about getting our roof on. What we're going to build for our model is a simple gable roof. If you notice, it has a slope on either side and flats on the end. This is called the gable end. Let's go over some parts and kind of the process we're going to do here. We have rafters we're going to cut. We have gable studs we're going to cut. And we also have in here ceiling joists that are running flat that give a place for the ceiling material, and most times it's sheetrock, gives it a place to nail to. We're going to do a little calculating to figure the length of our rafters, the spacing of our rafters, the length of our, up here at top, is called the ridge board, and then our gable studs that we have here. If you remember from the rest of our framing, when we're on 16 on centers on a model, we start from the outside and going to the outside edge of the next framing member was 2 3/8 inches. And then from framing member to framing member after that is 2 5/8. It repeats just like we did for floors, just like we did for walls. And if you'll notice here, this rafter is right over the top of that stud, which is over the top of, if you can see the nails, of a floor joist. So everything lines up on a roof all the way from the very top to the very bottom to carry that live load all the way to ground. Let's pay in particular attention here on some specific framing members. Now in this plan, I'm going to give you a stated overhang of 1 foot on the gable end and 6 inches on the side walls. What that means is this roof, from the face of this wall right here, the roof is going to extend out 1 foot in the real world, and for our purposes, that's 2 inches on our model. So you've got up here on the very top a projection ridge board that actually lines up all the roof rafters and gives them a place to tie to, and you actually nail them in at an angle into the ridge board. And you have to set this ridge board first. So what's the first thing you have to calculate is the length of this ridge board. If our model is 24 inches long, you add 2 inches to either side. That makes your projection ridge board at 28 inches. But what you have to remember is the first 2 inches are sticking out past. The first 2 inches are supposed to stick out past the end of this gable wall right here. Next measurement you're going to need is to start with is this gable stud right here, this center gable stud. And I will go ahead and tell you that the center gable stud, to make this work at the pitch, which is this angle right here, when you look at each rafter, they have an angle on the cut right here. And this angle is called a 6/12. So for every 12 feet we go across, we're going to come up 6 feet. Or another way to say it, if I come up 6 feet, this rafter is actually going to go out 12. So it creates an angle right here. And the way it's expressed in the framing world is called pitch, and it's expressed as a number over a run of 12. So if you remember, when we talk about roof framing, you've got the entire space across here that you're going to cover. And you're going to cover the roof is only going to be on half of it. So you've got to do a little math here for this triangle you have, and then add a little bit extra, because on this axle, I say, remember we told you we've got a 6-inch overhang on the sidewalls, which in our case is going to be 1 inch. You're going to add 1 inch to the length of your rafter to get the overhangs. And this is designed so that the water can run off a building and not splash and run up against it. There are framing styles that we used to use a long time ago where you actually stop the rafters right at the end of the house, and they basically they even and they flushed out and maybe hung on maybe an inch or so, but what would happen is all the water would run down the side of the house and cause a lot of damage. So we pretty well abandoned that years ago. So I've given you the ridge board, 28 inches long. I've given you the length of this first gable stud at 3 3/4 inch. In the gable stud, you start with the center, and then you're going to lay out in both directions. Remember, 16 on center, so you'll start and come over 2 3/8. Start from that side, go over 2 3/8, and then do 2 5/8. And what you'll have to do is just custom measure after you get the this first rafter in. Back to the rafter. This is one completed rafter. You notice it's got an angle. It's got an angle. I'll show you on a separate video exactly how to calculate and cut that, because that's most of your cutting right there, is cutting the rafters, and then matter nailing them in place. I'm going to draw your attention to something very specific here. On either end, in order to get the overhang, I've got to have a way, when I stick this barge rafter, which is the one that's out here on the end of the on the projection ridge board, and if I nail it on the end up here, there's nothing else to hold it. So what you do is you cut a slot for a lookout. And the lookout's the reason you saved your little pieces of wood. Literally fits in a notch and attaches back to a rafter behind it. And you can nail in from this end and nail in from here, and it secures that really well. It's probably the most common way of doing lookouts. And then you can face nail this barge rafter right here to hold it in place, and you give some place. So on our plan, we're going to need at least one notch for a lookout, because it'll nail at the top, and then it'll nail right here where the lookout comes and ties it together. You'll need to cut all your rafters, draw all your marks for layout, cut all your ceiling joist, and then start nailing it again in piece to piece. Once you get that finished, you'll measure your distance, a length and width, cut you a single sheet of Luan to be our sheathing to go over our rafters. And it'll need to extend just a little bit beyond the tails here on the ceiling rafters.